I'm glad to be here. As Sergeant Lash told you, not only am I coming on at ALS, but I'm Secretary of Top 3, so we enjoy the opportunity to get out here and come to your meetings and mentor some. One thing that's probably going to be brought up at our next meeting is trying to find somebody to consistently be a mentor to you as a Group 5-6 from the Top 3, so you have someone that you're always working with and you build a good rapport with. So that's something that's on our agenda to talk about. But as Sergeant Lash had, told you that next month, Chief Malpass is going to come and talk with you. So I'm going to, this meeting, just kind of go over just some basic things. Like you learn in ALS, you come through Airman Leadership School, and if you've been to INSO Academy, they talk about the same thing. Standards and discipline. And that's really one of the most important things at our level as NCOs and senior NCOs that we do to maintain good order and discipline in the military because of the nature of our jobs. And one of the things I tell the students when they come through ALS is senior NCOs and commanders will rely upon you at your level to be the first line supervisor that catches those violations. Those things, anything from behavioral issues to dress and appearance, anything like that, it really should be caught at the first line supervisor level. So it's critical that each one of you understand that purpose that you hold as a first line supervisor. But we'll start with the basics. I'm not going to reteach anything you learned in PME, but first thing is standards. We learned that they have to go hand in hand. Standards and discipline have to exist together. I can't set I can set a standard, but I should not assume that just because I set it, airmen are just going to meet it and stay at that standard their whole time, because I have to employ discipline at some point. And just like discipline just being executed on someone that had no idea as to why it's being executed is an unfair use of it also. So they have to go hand in hand. So we start with the standards, right? We start with initial feedbacks, talking to our airmen on a daily basis and making them aware of what's required of them. Having good training programs so that when they are new coming into your work center, you have a good training program set up to where they learn what's expected on the job, what's expected through AFIs, OIs, things like that. And you communicate that to them. And you monitor their behavior on a regular basis. You and others, communicate those things to you. The next thing, though, now is what happens when they start moving away from that standard, and that's where we start bringing the use of discipline in. One thing that I've learned, not just in the military, but even with my own children, is that not everybody responds to discipline the same way. One person might be scared to death of receiving administrative actions, and one, it may not even face them. And that's kind of probably what Chief Malpass is going to share with you next month is how do you get across that airman that's not scared of that administrative action. And there's creative methods that you can utilize to do those kind of things to execute discipline. But some of the things to think about, though, when you execute any form of discipline is consistency. That's one of the biggest things. First of all, being consistent with that airman, meaning that, okay, let's say that they've had a violation that I need to verbally counsel them on. Well, I need to make them aware of what's going to happen if it occurs again, and I need to be consistent to follow up with it if it does. Because if you don't, then all you've done is kind of at that point made them feel like, you don't really mean what you're saying, and maybe they can test some water in some other areas. So be consistent on what you say is going to occur if it repeats. Also be consistent with everybody in your work center. That means that we set the standards for everybody, so we uphold standards equally to everyone also at the same time. Being consistent not just with the airmen, but with all the airmen there also is extremely important. Some other things that's important to keep in mind with discipline is that it's been shown through studies that the most effective way to execute any form of discipline is attack the behavior, not the person. Okay, so we don't want to attack the person, meaning don't bring them in your office and call them, stupid and how could you be thinking that, because what we're doing is we're attacking the person. And what happens at that point is they start shutting down to where they start taking it as if it's you personally attacking them. And now they start to think, okay, you're just after me because you don't like me, and they don't even hear what you're saying. Whereas if you attack the behavior, this is what you have done wrong, this is what we need to improve, they're more receptive, and it's going to have a better effect, it's going to be received, and probably they're going to follow it much better. So that's one of the other things to remember is that we got to carry it out in a manner to where it's not that we're attacking the person, but we're also just attacking the behavior at that. Some other things, you always hear that phrase, praise in public, in private we correct. So, try to do your corrections in a counseling forum to where, you're talking with that person one-on-one and, going through with them what's happened. There are times, though, you may not be in that environment to where you have to go up right there at them on spot. Like say, if you see that individual doing something on the job that's completely unsafe, you need to stop them right there. You might have to right then go up to them and make them aware of what's happening. Hey, that's understandable, because we are still a military service, and that kind of stuff has to happen sometimes. So that's some of the key points to, in my own opinion, to keep in mind, and from a senior NCO, that we got to keep in mind with discipline's consistency, making sure that we attack the behavior, not the person. And, also at the same time, always weigh the amount of discipline that's necessary for what the violation is. We talk about that through PME, is that, it doesn't necessarily take an Article 15 to correct somebody that's late for the first time in their career, right? That's just way too much, which we never get that across the commander anyway, because we don't get to do that. That's punishment that only the commander can execute, that we might advise. So we use what the right mix of discipline for that level of violation is going to be. That's something also critical to think about. Let's see, is there any specific questions anybody has? Specifically on anything at all? Yes, sir?
Sir, how important do you think it is to explain the impact of their behavior as far as the violation of the standard that they made?
Well, that's a good point. That's critical, not only to explain the impact on them, but how it's impacting the unit and the mission too. Not just are you going to tell them how it's impacting them and what can come, possibly it can result down the road in loss of rank, but also how's it impacting the mission? How's their action? How's it hurting their teammates? How's it hurting the mission in some way? So that's extremely critical to also go through that with them, when you sit down and you have that discussion and execute the punishment, or not punishment, excuse me, or the corrective measures that you need to take and go through with them. You probably have looked at different things, or even taken measures yourselves, such as LOCs, LORs. Then you move into things such as UIFs and control rosters that we go to our first sergeant with and talk with them about, and then they move in the direction of working the commander to get those things going. Of course, Article 15s. A lot of times we're advising what we think. I mean, I've had situations where at a previous base we had an airman that received his second Article 15 within his second enlistment, it was his second Article 15 of his career. He was in his second enlistment, and he had received one in his first enlistment and then that second enlistment. So the first sergeant sat down with me and he said, I need you as a flight chief to tell me when is it time for us to move forward with an Article 15. And I said, it's time now. So that's all they needed from me, was to recommend what do we need to do at this point. Because, again, I kind of had tried to allow him, coming from another base, to start with a good slate. Let us see what you're like, where he had received Article 15 from the last installation, and his behavior again seemed to carry on the same way. So we started correcting. And that was just it. First sergeant, same thing like I said, asked me, when do we need to move in that direction to get the commander involved? And that's something else that's important to keep in mind, is progressive discipline. You can verbally counsel somebody 10 times, and at some point you got to say, I'm not getting across to this person. So we got to progress our discipline where, okay, verbal counseling didn't work. Let's move to a letter counseling. That didn't work. Let's now, maybe if I'm a staff sergeant tech, let's go get the master sergeant involved and let them discuss this with them and maybe do a reprimand. And if the master sergeant can't get through, let's go meet the first sergeant. Let's start talking UIF control roster. Because sometimes progressive discipline is not just the action, the level, but who's executing it carries a huge weight too. So that's some very critical things to keep in mind. Now, next month when Chief comes in and talks to you, he's going to share with you some things that you can try to rehabilitate people that doesn't cross the line of punishment, such as assigning additional duties for an extended amount of time like the commander might do when they execute an Article 15. But, just simple things. I know what I used at my last installation, had this NCO seem to be late all the time. I finally told her, okay, you're 30 minutes late this morning. You're going to stay 30 minutes late at the end of the day. And so I started taking away her time, and she stopped real quick, because the paperwork, she wasn't feeling anything from paperwork, but when you start doing things like that and it impacts people, then they start to get the hint a little quicker. And that'd be something Chief Melpass will probably cover a little more with you next month. But any other questions before I wrap up? I wanted to keep it within about a 10-minute time frame, so I'll continue on the meeting. Yes, sir?
Sir, Sergeant Christensen, I got a question. What about balancing different leadership styles within one organization? If there's 10 people and we have three different supervisors and we all lead in a different way. One might be administrative, the other one might be, hey, let's sit down and talk about this. It seems like sometimes they'll start forming cliques, like that supervisor is better than mine, and he or she might not even give you the opportunity to be the supervisor because of stuff like that. So, we can't control the other supervisor, so balancing that in a work session.
Well, that's going to be a critical thing to that is you, along with your peers, other staffs, techs, whatever, that are doing it, you need to get together and talk about these things because it affects all the airmen on how you're operating. You know, we would lots of times have meetings just as senior NCOs at the med group at Vance where I work. We'd get together and we'd talk about issues just like that. And we'd get each other's feedback, you know, with this situation, with this airman, this is how, you know, we might could handle it. And so we work together. And that's what the beauty of this type of forum where you guys come together as a 5-6 and, you know, you not just share things going on in your work center, but you can hear what somebody else is doing and maybe help them, maybe something you've encountered. But that definitely is where 3 or 4 of you have got to come together within your organization and discuss something in relation to that and come to at least a norm on how you handle situations. Because that's what it does. It creates a let's play mom against dad situation. Let's go to this person because we get what we want because they're easier because we know this person over here won't bend in any way. So you got to be on, you know, just like us in ALS, as a faculty, we all got to be on the same page because we can't have one flight that's, you know, feeling like things are this way for us and another that way. We got to stay on, you know, consistent together. Like I said, consistency. Okay? Any others? Yes, sir.
Sergeant McBride, CMS. I really don't have a question, more of a statement. I've learned the progression that you were talking about with the L season all the way up to the UI control roster. One advice I would probably pass on to some folks would be sometimes it's good to have somebody else sit in on that counseling session. I went through a very troublesome 6 months ago with somebody, and then it gets to a point where it's a he said, she said thing. I always highly encourage you, go ahead and grab a master sergeant from another office just to sit there, not necessarily speak up, not to say nothing, but just to witness the conversation, because once it gets to the point of a MEO issue or any other accusation, now it's like if I'm in trouble and I start to put off my, like, you know, for being late all the time, now I'm saying, well, he says this to me all the time. That wasn't even the topic at first. Now they're trying to push it on you for being the one, of course, documenting the situation. I highly encourage you to have somebody else sit in there with you. Somebody that's, you know, highly respected. Let them witness it, because if it does ever get to the point where it's accusations, MEO, you know, and all that, you have somebody else to witness the conversation and say, wait a minute, no, that conversation didn't happen. That's just a little advice from me.
And you got a good point, because I know probably about 3 or 4 classes ago I had a female that I needed to sit down and talk with, and I went to start bursting and said, I want you to sit in with me for just that reason, because I'm about to break some bad news to this young lady, and I don't want her to run and try to play something against me in some manner. So, you know, that's things to think about. Sometimes you got to be careful, you know, in those types of settings. And now I explained to her up front why Sir Burston was in there with me, strictly for that reason. You know, and you know, other things, you can leave the door open sometimes if you've got other people in offices near you so they can kind of hear what's going on. And, you know, some of your fellow peers or leaders, you know. Unfortunately, that puts us in bad positions sometimes like that. Yes, ma'am.
Sergeant Wallen from EO, since you brought that up, that was a good question. That really was, because we get that a lot of times. So the primary thing about that is, if you should do that, make sure it's somebody that's unbiased.
Correct. That's why you
not
go.
only that, right, and not only that, if you're doing it with one person, you might want to make sure after that you're doing it with other people of different genders as well, because that can also come up and look discriminatory in nature as well.
I do it with everybody.
Right. Okay.
Anybody, I mean, because I just learned that, to be honest with you, I never had that issue in my career. It popped up this year. An individual had multiple documentations from the chain of command. I mean, all the way up to, you know, from the enlisted to the officer. And then it got to the point where my feedbacks were being taken to the commander. I mean, this guy was in a lot of trouble and a lot of heat. And of course, all his rebuttals was me. My name was the answer to all his rebuttals. And I was lucky to have individuals who had sat in on those sessions going, wait a minute, that never happened. But had I not, it would have, it could have been, you know, messy for me, because now I got to defend myself. And I do it, and this, like I said, it's not male and female, it's, you know, across the board, I think.
Yep, so that's a good question. I didn't think about, because I haven't had to do that many times, but you know, it will be some good feedback or some good stuff to take with you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Sergeant Smith, just like, you know, you said earlier, you said, you know, a lot of this stuff is just, you know, the Spanish discipline goes with being corrective action, like you said, corrective behavior. And I think sometimes we have a tendency to focus more on the bad things versus as good things. I know it's been that you probably, you know, if you have a tendency to not give your troop any attention, only whenever, you know, when they're doing something bad, that's when you focus in. Then a lot of the corrective measures, they're not really feeling like you really care about them, because when they are doing something good or doing, you know, sometimes we're so busy that we don't even say, hey, you're doing awesome. As soon as they, you know, got a hiccup, boom, you know, we take the time to pull out the paper, pull out the pens, and I think sometimes, you know, like you were saying, I think it actually is more benefit. It's really beneficial whenever your subordinate is able to see you just as proactive with them when they're doing something good, versus as you doing, you know, you correcting them when they're doing something bad.
And even on top of that, you know, even when you carry out these actions, you want to let them leave in some way, in a manner that they believe that you still have faith in their capabilities. You know, telling them, I know you can improve, you can turn this around. You know, because that you want them to leave with their head up some, as opposed to completely down. You know, when they leave, it's always try to help them get out. Because again, we're trying to rehabilitate. You know, trying to get that person back to the standard of being a productive military member like we need them to be. You know, in so many ways.
I call that the Oreo effect. You know, even if you're disciplining someone, you bring them in and think of something positive. You know, think of something, you know, that they're doing well. You know, and then kind of gradually go into the negative, like, hey, listen, the reason why I brought you in here, and end with, you know, something good. Hey, you can do this. I got faith in you. That you have faith in as a supervisor. So anytime I'm having feedback from my supervisor, what can I do? And I always say, I'm sensitive. I need the Oreo effect. That's what I tell them. You know, start with something good. Tell me what I'm terrible at, and then end with something good. So I'm sensitive. So, that's what I like.
But any other questions? Again, I appreciate the time to come out here and see and talk with you. You know, next meeting, we'll have the ALS class in here, so we're prepared for a big pack again. We didn't have them here today because they're doing the push-up-a-thon for the first sergeant. So, but thanks again, and keep doing what you're doing. Like I said, I tell the students, and this came from Chief Roy when I was at the Professional Airmen's Conference in July. The first line supervisor's job in the Air Force is the hardest job because you got to balance doing your work and supervising at the same time. And it's a very hard job, so keep up the good work and keep working, communicating as peers. You know, get that communication line going about what's happening. We do that as senior NCOs and help each other out, okay? All right, thank you.